Let's take a look at some of Excel's logic functions. We'll look at 5 quick lessons, including the basic if function, using and or for your if functions, and some additional logic functions including SUMIF, Countif, and AVERAGEIF. So we're going to be calculating the discount amount in column D using an if function, because the discount will vary based on the sale amount. So the if statement that we're going to be putting together is going to test the sale amount, and it's going to calculate it based on our rule. Our rule states that if the sale amount is greater than $5,000, they'll receive a 3% discount. Otherwise, they'll receive a 2% discount. The if statement is going to be, the if function is going to be perfect for this. So here's how it's going to work. I'm going to click in cell D3 and begin typing the if statement, which is equal if, open parenthesis. And the first thing we need in the if statement is going to be the test. The test is if the sale amount is greater than $5,000. So the way that we state that is going to be clicking on the sale amount in cell C3 and using the greater than symbol, and then the amount 5,000. I'm careful not to use the comma in that 5,000 amount, because commas are only used to separate the arguments or the pieces of that if function. So the comma comes after that amount. That's the test, is C3 greater than 5,000. The next piece of the if statement is going to be what to do if that's true. So according to our rule, if it's greater than 5,000, they get a 3% commission. So here comes my 3%. Then comes my comma, and then the third and last part of this if statement is what to do if that is not true. So if that amount is not greater than 5,000, they get a 2% discount. So 2%. And it's always good form to close whatever parens you open up. So let me close that paren at the end, press the enter key. And since this first sale is not greater than 5,000, the discount amount is 2%. Let's take that formula and drag it using the fill handle in the bottom right to the other sales as well to figure out whether they get the higher discount rate. So we can see it's sort of sorted in ascending order. So I can see once I get to this amount, 5,001, that they've crossed that threshold and they will get the higher discount rate. So our if statement is working. And just to double check, I can always take an existing amount and change it to see it recalculate. I'm going to do an undo. And there we go, our first if function. In this next example, we'll be using not only an if statement, but an and as well. And what that will allow us to do is to test more than one condition. So in this example, if an employee's total sales is greater than 45,000 and they have been employed for more than 5 years, they'll get a 3% commission rate. Otherwise, a 2%. So we'll be using an if statement to perform the tests, and based on the results of those tests, doing one of two things, either the true action or the false action. What makes this different, of course, is that we're testing two things. The first test is if the sales are greater than 45,000. The second test would be if the number of years employed is greater than 5. So let's go ahead and give it a shot. In cell E9, we start off with the equal sign, the if statement, opening the parens there. And since I'm testing the two things, I now need an and statement. So I'm going to go ahead and type in and inside of the parens here for the and, I feed it my two tests. The first test is if the total sales in C9, so I'm going to click on C9, greater than 45,000, similar to our first example. But since I'm testing two things, now I type in the comma and I move on to the second test, and that's if Mike's years employed are greater than 5. So that concludes the test portion of the statement. So I close the paren that I opened for that and I type in a comma. So that's the whole test. Now, based on the results of this test, if both conditions are true, it's going to come over here and do what we have in the true portion, and that's give Mike a 3% commission. And if neither of those are true, or if one or the other is not true, it will go ahead and give Mike a 2%. Right? So once again, both of these conditions need to be met in order to go to the true action. Otherwise, it's going to be the false action. So I'm closing the paren at the end, pressing the enter key, and since Mike's total sales and years employed meet both of those conditions, he does get the higher commission rate. Well, let's copy that down just using the fill handle to drag to the others. And we can see that because John's sales are less than 45,000 and his years employed is less than 5, he gets the lower commission amount. Pat has the total sales, but not the years of employment. And Sarah does not have the total sales, but does have the years employed. Okay. And just to sort of round this out, we can calculate the commission amount, not with an if statement, just a simple multiplication. So I'm going to say equal total sales times, the symbol for multiplication is the star, and the commission rate in cell E9. Pressing the enter key to calculate Mike's total commission amount, and then I can copy that down to the others as well. So there we go, using an if and an and statement combined to figure out what the commission rate would be in a situation like this. Okay, in the next example, coming over to the if and or tab, we'll be looking at yet another if test. And we'll be testing two things, but the results are going to be a little bit different because rather than both conditions having to be true, we'll use an or statement that means if either of those tests are true, it will go ahead and give us whatever is in the true position. So similar structure, different results. So in this scenario, we're saying that if an employee's total sales is greater than 45,000 or they have been employed for more than 5 years, they'll get the higher commission rate of 3%. Otherwise, they'll receive the 2%. So in this case, we'll be using an if and an or statement. And if either of those conditions are true, they'll get the 3%. Otherwise, they'll get the 2%. So let's come on down into cell E9, and we'll start off with the equal sign, typing in if, open paren, and bringing in that or function so that we can test multiple items there. After the or, I'm typing in an open parenthesis, and I can move on to the first test. The first test is C9 greater than 45,000, comma. The next test is years employed greater than 5. That is the end of the test, so I am going to type in a closed paren. That closed paren corresponds to the open paren that we typed in after the or statement. Now comes a comma to indicate that we're on to what to do if either of those are true. So if either of those are true, they are going to get a 3% commission. And if neither of those are true, they're going to get a 2% commission. So closing off the parenthesis that we started with that if statement at the beginning, pressing the enter key, I can see the results there. And once again, since both those conditions are true, then of course Mike is going to get the higher commission rate. Let's use the fill handle to drag down to the others. And based on the original values, as we saw, John does not have the greater than 45,000 in sales and does not have the greater than 5 years employment, so the lower commission rate is applied. Pat has the greater than $45,000 sales. The years employed is not quite there, but since it's an or condition, he will get the higher commission rate. And the same with Sarah. While she doesn't have the sales, she does have the years, so that ends up being a higher percentage there as well. So if you want either of the conditions to be true, or if either of those conditions are met to move on to the true action, then what you're going to want to do is combine that or statement. Okay. And now we'll take a look at the SUMIF function. So moving along to the SUMIF tab. This is a fun example where we have a list of expenses, and those expenses have been categorized. So there's a column that tracks if they're transportation or entertainment, lodging, food, entertainment, etc. Well, what we want to do is we want to use a SUMIF statement that will add the expenses, but only if they fall into a specific category. So the way that we're going to do this is we're going to use a SUMIF that checks a range to see if it meets a criteria. That range is going to be this category column. And if it meets a specific criteria. What's the criteria? Well, transportation, lodging, food, entertainment, etc. Then what it's going to do is go on and add the corresponding amount over here in column J, but once again, only for those specific charges. So let's take a look at using the SUMIF to make this happen. The SUMIF is a statement that involves 3 arguments or parameters, the range that you're checking the values for. So for us, that's going to be the cells in the category column, the criteria, that's exactly what you're looking for, and you can either type in that value, but since we have the label here, we'll be using the label that we see in column F. And then lastly, it needs the range of cells that you want to add up, so we'll be selecting the cells in the amount column, all of them, even though they are not all transportation costs, because that's the job of the SUMIF, to isolate just those ones that fall into that particular category. So let's give it a shot. So I want the answer to go into cell H4. I'm going to just make this a little bit bigger here. And we're going to start off with the equal sign, typing in SUMIF, open parenthesis. And the first thing it wants is the range of cells I'm testing. And that's going to be these cells. So clicking and dragging from F13 down to cell F24, I'm going to type in a comma. And then it's the criteria. The criteria is what category am I looking for? So once again, I can either type in the word transportation, or I can click on cell F4 where the word transportation is already written in here as a label. And then I type in a comma, and then what range of cells do I want to add up? So that's going to be all of the cells in the amount column over here. So clicking and dragging from J13 down to J24. And that's it. I'm going to close the paren at the end, press the Enter key, and it is telling me that the total of my transportation cost is $1,067. So I just want to verify that. So what I want to do is just use the filters that are added to the spreadsheet to say, just show me the transportation costs. I can't go by this amount because this once again is adding up everything, but I can select the cells in the amount column and look all the way at the bottom, right below my cursor at this point. There is the auto calculate that is telling me that the sum of the selected cells is $1,067.70. And that is exactly what the SUMIF did. And hopefully this gives you a little bit of a visual to understand what that SUMIF statement is doing. I'm going to clear that filter and we'll go on and do the rest as well. So it's just, or we'll do one or two more. It's just, we'll do the lodging. So it's equal SUMIF, open parenthesis, the range of the cells that I'm testing. That range is F13 through F24, followed by a comma and the criteria. The criteria is, in this case, lodging. Lodging is in cell F5. Next comes a comma, and then the cells that I want to add up, that whole range. Closing the paren at the end, pressing the Enter key, and then I have the total there, which would be 600. Let's double check that. So I'm going to flip this category filter over to, instead of selecting all, this is just the lodging. And it's just the one amount, so I don't even need to involve the auto calculate. I can see straight away that that is calculating correctly. So your SUMIFs, great to add up cells when you don't want the entire range, but only if a specific criteria is met. And now let's look at the Countif. So on the Countif tab, we're going to be looking at another statement, Countif, that will look through a range of cells and count how many of them meet a specific criteria. So the Countif really only needs 2 arguments. It needs to know what range of cells that you're looking to, to determine there, and what the criteria is. So we'll be using a Countif to count how many people have a yes value in column G and how many have a no in column G. So to calculate the yeses, we're coming in here into cell J6. We're going to start off with the equal sign and type in our Countif, open parenthesis. The range is all of the cells in column G here, starting with G3, clicking and dragging all the way down to get cells G3 through G32, followed by a comma, and then the criteria I can either type in or click, for example, on the label. So the label here would be what's in cell I6. I can close the parenthesis, and when I'm done, press the enter key. And what it's saying is that it is able to find 12 instances in column G where the word yes appears. Let's go ahead and do the next one. That's the no values. So similar, it's going to be equal Countif, open paren, selecting the range. Now, a quick way to select from the beginning of this range to the end of it would be clicking on the first one, then Control-Shift down arrow. That should take you to the end of that range, and that works out just fine. But once again, that's G3 colon G32, followed by a comma, and then it needs the criteria. And the criteria in this case would be I7. We want to count up how many times it finds the word no there. Close the paren at the end, press the enter key, and there we go. So just to confirm that our Countif is working properly, maybe I'll just sort the values there. So in column G, I'm going to do a sort ascending. That'll put all the yeses together and all the no's together. I can just select the no's and look at the auto calculate at the bottom of the screen on the status bar right beneath my mouse pointer or cursor. We can see that the no's that I have selected add up to 18. So this value here that we calculated is correct. And then I can click and drag as well to select the yeses and check that auto calculate, which comes out to 12. That is exactly what the Countif calculated for us. So we can see that it has worked properly. And finally, we are on the average if, which, similar to the other if statements that we've been exploring, will average a group of cells based on the criteria. So in this example, we want to find the average rating, and the rating is in column I, for our employees. And our employees fall into different statuses. The status is in column F. Those statuses are things like full-time and half-time. So what we'll be doing is using average if to look in column F first for the full-times and find out what the average rating is for those full-times. So here's what it's going to look like. I'm in cell F3 L3, and I'm going to start off with the equal sign, average if, open parenthesis, and the range of cells that I'm testing. So that's going to be the cells in column F, F3 through F25. Next comes a comma, and it's the criteria. What status am I looking for? I am looking for cells where the status is equal to full-time. So I have the full-time label here in K3. I'm going to give that a click, followed by a comma. And the last argument, or the last piece of information that this average if function is going to require, is what cells contain the values that I want to actually average up. So that's going to be in column I. That's I3 down to I25. Closing the paren at the end, And that's the end of that statement. I can press the enter key and I can see that the average for the full-time employees would be 3.21. And we'll check that in a minute. Let me just do one more example here, and that's for halftime. So it's going to look like this: equal average if, open parenthesis, the range of cells that I'm testing. So that's in the status column. Once again, clicking and dragging to select cells F3 through F25, followed by a comma. Next is the criteria. So the criteria in this case, I just want to focus on my halftime employees, so I can click on that label where we've got halftime already written out for us, followed by a comma, and the last argument is going to be the group of cells I'm trying to average. So that's going to be I3 down to I25. I'm going to close the paren at the end, press the enter key, and the average for my halftime would be 3.25. So let's go ahead and check at least the full-time here, the 3.21. I'm going to use the filter for status, and instead of seeing them all, I just want to see the full-time. So I'm turning off select all and turning on full-time. And I just need to select the cells then for those ratings, and I can look at the auto calculate at the bottom of the screen, letting me know that the average right below my mouse pointer is 3.21, and that is exactly what the average if function did for me. So once again, the average if is going to allow you to look through a list. It's going to allow you to focus on a subset of the values, in this case just the full-time, and it's going to allow you to pull an average from any column in that list. Okay, so there you go. So that's it for now. Thanks for watching, and hope to see you again soon.